from Finland. I like racing games.
Yeah.
But for a racing game to work for me, it's got to have the juice. It's got to have the juice, the racing juice. The juice in my personal racing game parlance is not always easy to define, but it's about feel. Like, how does it feel to actually drive or to drift or to corner your vehicle? I don't care much about realism. So Gran Turismo generally, as much as I've enjoyed certain entries in bursts, always left me a bit cold because it's too rooted in the real. Whereas Forza Horizon, on the other hand, with slightly more arcadey handling, but still feeling relatively grounded, feels really good. That's got the juice. Sega Rally in the arcade and on the Saturn, that had the juice. Daytona USA, definitely in the arcade, less so on the Saturn, but it's got the juice. But the sequels to both those games have always been a bit lackluster in my experience. So Sega Rally 2 on the Dreamcast, to me, feels unfinished. I don't enjoy it at all. Daytona 2001, also on the Dreamcast, does feel finished, but it's by a team who apparently had never played the original. So it feels like a different series completely. It's just, it looks like Daytona, it sounds like Daytona, doesn't feel like Daytona, which is odd. I'd heard of, but I'd never played 2007's Sega Rally Revo, and spotting on Wikipedia's famously always correct page, video games developed in Finland, I did some digging, found the long delisted PC port, got to racing. Sega Rally Revo, it's got the juice. It's absolutely got the juice. The big selling point for this entry was terrain deformation. You cruise around, cars carve lines into the mud and snow, whatever else you end up cruising over. And like the similarly juicy Wave Race 64, this additional element changes the feel of each track and lap. It's great. It's really, really good. The handling is loose, as rally games should be, but it's also grounded enough that you can feel the racing line as it's sculpted by the cars ahead of you. You almost kind of lock into it and need to fight against the grooves that are cut in the mud. Sort of blasting across an arc of mud to attempt a daring over or undertake always feels thrilling, because you're not just battling the angles of the course, but also kind of the recent history of other racers cornering and approach play. It's just really good. Puddles of water as well. They become something to be wary of, not only because you get locked into a sort of aquaplane skid, like you did even in the first Sega Rally on the desert stage, but because the mud you've kicked up and painted your car with also starts to subtly alter the handling of the car too, and water becomes the only real way to kind of mid-race reset your aim and weight so you can kind of drive true again.
I like that.
It's a really detailed model for 2007, but one that still balances bouncy, skiddy arcade fun with ostensibly real world physics. You know, it doesn't feel like you're playing a kart racing game, but it doesn't feel like Gran Turismo. It's not dry like that. The career mode as well is expansive in a way that early Sega Rally games obviously never were, because it launched first as a home console game and then got ported to the arcade as Sega Rally 3. So it was trying to get home audience first. And it's really fascinating to look at now and in context of its wider series, because it shows Sega attempting to figure out what an arcade racer needed to be a good few years before Turn 10 set the open world Horizon framework that's now kind of standardized enough to be influencing fucking Mario Kart of all things. That wasn't on my bingo card before the announcement recently. Sega Rally has medals to unlock, there's cars and liveries to earn, tracks to master, all the good stuff that makes you finish a series in second and immediately think both, I could do better, but also I'm going to be rewarded for doing so as well. So it's absolutely worth my time. Now, with all this gushing praise, small problem, teeny tiny problem, eagle-eared game historians may already have realised that Sega Rally Revo, in its 360, PS3, PC and later arcade incarnations, was developed by a team called Sega Racing Studio. That's fine. They were made up of ex-Codemasters employees. That's all right. Based in Solihull, in the UK. Everything I've just said is basically null and void.
Brilliant.
My subtle foreshadowing earlier about Wikipedia was to highlight that as great as that site is, there are limitations. Because a category page like games developed in Finland doesn't specify products outside of a game name. So if a big budget game was developed primarily in the UK, say, but had a multiplayer component outsourced to Shanghai, it's on the editors, and therefore those interested and invested enough to check, to decide the overriding nationality of that game. You know, where does it actually come from? What we kind of planting our flag in. And in this case, if a game had multiple versions, it's again up to the enterprising editors to make the call if the lead platform means it's a game from country A or country B. So Sega Rally Revo, by my metric, is a UK-developed video game. But Fear not, for Bugbear Entertainment, our flat-out friends I mentioned earlier, drift to our rescue with the definitely finished, developed port of Sega Rally Revo for the PSP, Sony's PlayStation Portable. It's the same game but different.
Finish!
And you know what? It absolutely has a portion of the juice. It's still a loosey-goosey rally game. Cars still get sprayed with mud and slide about nicely, but the juiciest bit of Sega Rally Revo is the track definition, and perhaps understandably, it's completely missing from this version of the game because the PSP is absolutely punching above its weight anyway with the port. Like, it's a very respectable handling model. There's great graphics for the handheld. It looks really good for the time. But the mud chucked up all over your car is purely visual. And whether you're racing on lap 1 or lap 201, they're just decals on the road, which kind of purport a track shredded and carved. They're basically just fancy lines being drawn on with a Sharpie. So it's not the same. I still like the game, and I'm thankful for its existence, if only because it's kind of in a roundabout way justified me having played a good few hours of the PC port, but it's not quite the game I was talking about a few minutes ago. If you pick up the PSP game, emulate it if you've got the old UMD for your handheld console. There's still a sizable campaign. It absolutely would have kept me very busy nearly 20 years ago if I was playing this contemporaneously on my PlayStation Portable after maybe a dull shift working at Staples or on the bus to college. But it's not as good as Sega Rally Revo on any other platform. And it's not even as interesting as Bugbear's other games like Flat Out or Wreckfest, or even their horribly misguided Ridge Racer game called Unbounded, which I love Ridge Racer.
That's not a word.
I hated Unbounded. Not just because grammatically it makes no sense, it's just a horrible game. But I didn't play any of those because Wikipedia lied to me. So, on the PSP, comes from Finland, it's fine.
Brilliant. Yeah, so on for using Juice as a comparison point, less Tropicana, more Sunny D.
Yeah, or maybe someone said, would you like a glass of juice? And you're assuming, oh, fresh juice, yeah, lovely. And they're like, squash, all right?
Gotcha.
And it's like, yeah, I suppose.
So it's squash, it's high juice. Yeah. Do you remember high juice?
Yeah, and of those as well. It's like, what flavour is it? It's like, orange. Fuck's sake.